Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Draft Chat. As always, I am Bug Maniac Mark here with you with my brother Beach.
Hey guys.
He's coming to us from the outside today. It looks beautiful over there.
Yeah, it's been raining for 2 days straight, so it's starting to clear up and I'm gonna enjoy it before it
Good.
starts again.
Yeah, and recently I was kind of surprised to learn that the draft is going to be starting up much sooner than I had anticipated. As
Yeah,
soon as this Friday, I think. How do you feel about that?
I'm so excited. I was exhausted this weekend. I've been sleep deprived and overworked, and I was just on the Discord and I felt rumblings at first, and then felt like Carter wanted to, I don't know, it feels like there's some momentum that's just carried over from last season. And I'm so thankful that he, in spite of everything that he does in his life for school and whatever else, has been willing to be the administrator again because it's a lot of work. And I'm surprised that we're starting this fast, but I'm also really happy because I want the distraction and I want to redeem myself for last season.
Same, same here. It seems like everybody is on board with starting this thing early. I'm not sure if it was the discussions on tier Pokemon, but those seem to have all
Mhm.
settled. We can look at the updated tier list. I recommend everybody who hasn't been paying attention to the voting to go check it out because there are some very big changes. I'm very excited with what happened. I think the democratic process was great. We had a lot of great nominations. We had a lot of great changes, and I expect that this season is going to shake out quite differently in terms of Pokemon use. Last season was the first doubles draft for a whole lot of people. Maybe the first time that they played doubles, more than what they played in the few in-game battles that include it. But now, people, I think, are a little more confident in their choices, and after seeing what's good, they're going to be excited about the drafting process this time. And that's kind of what I want this episode to be about, is talking about what is good to pick, what is good to look for in a Pokemon for your draft. And I feel like we're going to end up having, we've already had a lot of good discussion, but I'm going to end up putting in a lot of little excerpts of us talking about certain moves that we think are good, what you should be looking for, and our thoughts on what you should be picking out of Tier 1 and Tier 2.
How do you decide what to pick first? Do you pick what you think is best or what you are told is best? Or do you pick what is the most fun to play for you historically? Or do you pick the shiniest new toy in the box?
Yeah, if I'm answering personally, it's kind of changed, though. I am someone who I really love the game of Pokemon in general, and I really love being able to use things that have a lot of versatility and unexpected moves because I like being able to change my team every week. We saw that last season where I ended up picking up a very good first pick, which was Rillaboom. But he did have the versatility of being a terrain user, and then I was able to build on that a little bit with other Pokemon. But historically, like I've picked Mew first in a singles draft just because I really love having a Pokemon that is such great malleable butter for my team that I can kind of like build the whole meal around it. What about you?
Man, there's another plane. For me, it's all style or what I happen to be hooked on. Like, I think that I see a similarity between the Pokemon I pick and how I'll start listening to a song and I have to listen to it on repeat for a whole month and then I'm sick of it and I'm never going to listen to that again. I just spend a lot of time watching stuff and doing like experiments that I would say are kind of useless, except I think that something is fun to execute or I've really liked that Pokemon's look, or no one is using it, and I think that someone should. But I like the versatility too. I don't like making a pick early on that suddenly shuts out all the other Pokemon that I might pick from there. I also don't really like Pokemon that just have a dedicated role like Dracovish. Um, I want to be able to kind of undermine its moveset a little bit and show up with something maybe expected on the team, but not expected in performance.
Yeah, I feel that. I also think that Pokemon that are less one note have an advantage in draft format because it is harder to prepare for them. And I think we've seen that in a lot of ways. Like Colossal Weavile, the Colossal Weakness Policy thing is very good, but maybe it's kind of easy to expect what's going to come from that. Like you mentioned, Dracovish, also Reggie Drago that Carter drafted last season.
Oh yeah.
I feel like they were very high offense threats, but not very hard to play around. I guess I'm thinking the same thing about Regigigas Wheezing, another threat that's very high offense, but Regigigas struggles to do too much else besides maybe some small support role. I feel like this meta is very different in compared to ladder or tournament meta because you do have a great idea of what you can expect for, and you have your textbook being Cerebi or Bulbapedia or whatever you use. You pretty much have all the information you need on your opponent's team, and the less options that they have, the easier it is for you to study and for you to prepare.
Yeah, you're making me think of the time that Casey Traver brought a choice band Grimmsnarl. I forget if it was to a draft match or to a tournament, but that's a perfect example of taking advantage of that Pokemon's great attacking attributes. But man, when you play a Grimmsnarl team on ladder, it it has one attack max.
Yeah, maybe
Maybe
breaking
Spirit
swipe
Break,
or whatever. Yeah, spirit break.
but it's there to support the team in general. And so if you can subvert those expectations, not only do you get the surprise factor, but if that Pokemon's also really good at that thing too, whoa.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that goes a little bit into what we're going to talk about later in what makes a really good Mon for the tier, and in my opinion, that would warrant a first pick. But before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about the draft structure and what we've learned from Carter that's going to be different this season as opposed to last. And I know that I talked a little bit about this on the last draft chat, so I will try to skim over the things we already know. We've seen the tier drops and the tier changes. Please go check those out when you have a chance. Another big change this season that's happening is that there are going to be divisions. We took a break from divisions last season, but it has been a fairly standard part of the draft just to limit how many matches everybody has to play. Because, as everybody knows, drafts take a very long time, and sometimes there's a level of burnout. So this season we have 20 players and we have 2 divisions. You are going to be sorted in one of 2, I assume randomly. I think at this point the people have voted and it's going to be randomly. Save for the 4 new players. Justin, James...
Is there a Trevor?
Trevor, yeah, Shiny King Trevor, and the younger Ewert brother, I think Drew, who is joining us. Thankfully, we have all you new players here, so thanks for doing that. You guys are all going to be seated into the same group to start off with, which I think is a good way to ensure that there are going to be competitive matches between people that maybe do not have as much experience in the doubles draft meta. That's not to say, I'm not trying to say that you guys are not going to perform very well, but I do think that Carter made this decision to make sure that everybody is having, a good time. The rest of us are going to be seated into these groups randomly, and you will be fighting everybody in your draft group.
Yeah.
So we're going to be having 9 matches each, and then at the end of the, I guess, normal season, as opposed to going directly into a bracket where the bottom 8 are eliminated, I believe the bottom 4 from each section, from each group, are going to play each other in a last chance qualifier sort of thing, and whoever come out on top, the top 4 will be joining the other 12 players in the top 16 playoff brackets. So even if you have a terrible season, even if you've gone 0-5 to start off with, there is hope for you to win the whole thing, which I just think is really cool, and I'm glad we're doing this.
Wait, hold on. I love this too, but can't you go 0-9 and still win the whole
You
thing?
can go 0-9. You could, just if you're having a very busy schedule. I'm not going to promote this. I shouldn't say anything, but you could
Carter,
take things nice and slow.
yeah, thank you for bringing the last chance qualifier back. I like it because there's always that twinkle tackle of hope until the end. And
Yeah.
it's fun to feel like you're participating until the end. I know that I was disheartened once I was booted from the tournament, and I still watched, but if I had thought that I could claw my way back in, man.
Yeah. So I think that that's a great change. Another change that we have that is more, I guess, just for preventing any sort of funny business, but I think is another great change, is since we are doing a best of 3 format, we are going to be playing matches against each other, and you need to win 2 out of 3 games in doubles. The games are very fast, so for you new players that are only used to playing singles, you might think, wow, that's a lot of time, but don't worry, the matches go much faster than you might imagine, sometimes being over in as few as 4 turns. But you will be forced to open all 3 of your games at the same time. So you challenge your opponent, you open the game. You challenge your opponent again, you open the second game. You challenge your opponent again, you open the third game. Even if there are only going to be 2 games in this set, you open all 3. I would recommend you label them like G1, G2, G3, just for replay sake. And then you end up playing your matches one at a time without setting the timer on until after team preview. The reason that we're doing this, and I think it's a really good reason, is that there will be no way for people to edit their teams between matches. Now, I don't think that in a friendly league like this people are doing that, but it is plain to see that if you realize that you really want that coverage like Aquatail on your whatever, on your Dragonite, it would be way too easy for you to just quickly dip out, edit it, and challenge the second game without having that rule in place. So I thank Carter for bringing that into the fray as well, just to make sure that there's no funny business going on. And then the last thing, I guess, that I want to talk about in terms of rules and such is that I believe we are going to be implementing a time on the draft process itself, a time limit. So we are going to be choosing Pokemon with potentially a 12-hour limit on your choice. I think that Carter might be considering having a few extensions in place just for extreme circumstances where someone is out of service or has a serious situation come up. But that is also going to be something that facilitates the draft process going a little bit faster than previously.
How is draft order going to get
Oh, thank you.
determined?
Thank you. Yeah, this is another thing that if you haven't been paying attention to Discord, you might not know, but draft order is going to be decided completely randomly through a marble race, a digital marble race that Carter will be streaming and hopefully recording at some point. Yeah, I think that that's a fun way. We had kind of talked about deciding order based on letting the players that did poorly last season choose their slot. We've done that before. There are other ways of doing it randomly, but I think that this is going to be quick and easy, and nobody can really complain when they're able to see the results happen directly in front of their eyes. I think we're going to be able to figure out our draft order relatively soon, which is a really important thing, because where you are in the draft is going to influence your picks so very much.
Yeah, not only because things are disappearing, but it influences your style of picking. I think that you just brought up that, like, if you're towards the end of the draft, maybe you need to be looking for those lower tier Pokemon that are essential to your vision, because you've already missed out on tier one. They're not going to get picked over this next round. You know, the whole draft's probably going to move down to the tiers that you're interested in.
Yeah, especially if you instigate that first tier 2 pick and it seems like you grabbed something really good. I also think that if you are at either extreme end of the draft, you can start thinking about combo pieces that would be much easier for you to pick up. Let's say Weezing Regigigas, let's say Hawlucha and a Terrain Setter, or like Pincurchin, Alolan Raichu, something like that is going to be
Circuitry Rillaboom.
Yeah, Circuitry Rillaboom. I do not think that Rillaboom is going to last that long, but something like that would be very scary and much easier, whether it's terrain, weather, or other combo for you to pick up if you're on either far end. That probably covers it for just the mechanics side of the draft that's going to be starting very soon. As always, check the announcements, check the rules that Carter just posted on the Discord today, just to look over things if you have any questions on like the amount of points, the tiers, whatever. For the next segment of the video, we are going to be talking about good things in doubles, and it's going to be a little bit of a disjointed talk, but I'm gonna throw in some footage of us talking about what we think you should be looking for in a Pokemon to draft. Like, I think there's just some generic things that I'd like to suggest that people look for. I have a list of like things that are good in a Pokemon. Like, obviously, like type synergies take precedent over a lot of things, but you always want to be on the lookout for Fake Out, Intimidate, Follow Me, Tailwinder, Trick Room, Prankster, priority moves in general for weakness policy stuff, Terrain and Weather, Setters, Abusers, Unburden.
Do we need to explain why?
I don't know. I think that we can have a little quick conversation about why.
I don't know if we need to. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the generic reason why is that a lot of those things just make you either hit harder and get the kill, or they make you hit first. Or they debuff your opponent and you get to survive. And that's basically how I view VGC. Like, what's good in VGC is denying kills or denying moves.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if I agree with everything you say, and we should talk about maybe doubles again at some point, especially for new joiners. I'm wondering, like, what about the player that thinks, and I'm often this player, I can come up with one strategy to rule them all and forget Fake Out, forget weather. The problem with that, I feel like, is the draft over any other format lends itself to you like having a strongly different variant of your team like each week. And it's like the bigger your toolbox is at the beginning, the better chances you have it surviving. While if you just like you go in hard Trick Room and that's all you're gonna do, fine, you might have the best Trick Room team out there, but all 9 people you're facing are gonna know exactly
what you're going to do.
Yeah. So I feel like it adds to the unpredictability, even if you don't intend or don't really like the idea of it. I'm going to try and convince myself to do a better job this time of not overlapping roles, but having the whole range of roles.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that makes me think because I'm a player that really loves options, and I feel like a lot of other drafters, like Nels for sure, someone that you want to have as many combos on your team as possible, which I also don't think works out that well all the time. And depending on the player, someone might be really good at playing with a dedicated rain draft, and that's just something I've never done really, and that I don't look for. So you're totally right in that that advice is soft advice. It does give you more tools, obviously, but maybe I think back to the advice I gave to Isaac in drafting Grookey to have the terrain option for his Sceptile and to have, you know, and then the like Mr. Rhyme for the Ice Shard weakness policy. And though I think it worked out, it maybe wasn't what Isaac was going to be comfortable with playing. And I think that he performed way better with his like Urshifu, Celesteela, Raichu stuff.
Do you think there's any merit to intentionally doubling up on like types of sweeper or styles of sweeper, kind of like you do in singles, so that your first one like softens all the checks and counters, and then your next one finishes them up? Is that a viable train
Yeah.
of thought in doubles, or is that kind of exclusive to singles?
I think it's more exclusive to singles, but I think in a lot of ways you don't have to worry so much about full type coverage in doubles. The fact that you're only bringing 4 Pokemon, that your opponent's only able to bring 4 Pokemon. I mean, look at how well Tyler's
That
team did with
that's exactly what I'm thinking about.
the sheer amount of ice, and didn't really, even though I had several steel types, I was still struggling against his fairy ice Pokemon, and all he had to do was have one good counter in his draft, one great fire type, to really help deal with that. And though I do think he still struggled against Carter and kind of had to like work around the Excadrill and the Charizard, which was probably harder for Tyler than it needed to be. I think that there's a case for having like doubling on types, even if there's the same role, for sure, as long as they're doing things maybe a little differently. Like, you don't want a situation where you have 2 Pokemon and one just does everything the other does but better, because you're probably always going to be bringing one. I think you're talking more about having like 2 on the same team that you bring.
Yeah, like I think Dragapult Gengar for like a strong like ghost offense. Whichever one goes down first, fine. I've got another fast ghost sweeper that can status you
Yeah.
coming up next.
Yeah.
But
I do think they have some differences too that
for sure, as long as I guess as long as you can argue that they each have a niche, then maybe it's fine. And in doubles, those resist berries that don't really get used a whole lot in singles
yeah.
come into play because you effectively don't have that weakness for a turn.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're only around 2 turns, so
I think you're totally right. You not only have the berries, you have Assault Vest, which can help a lot. You have Focus Sash, which is going to be on some member of your team. So in that case, it very well might be on Gengar, making his weaknesses a little less relevant. You also have the option, depending on what type you're doing, rain or sun, you can have weather to help offset things. I think you're muted.
yeah, there are planes flying into Portland.
That's fine. But yeah, so on my Steel Panic team, which is a team I'm testing out on ladder that has a lot of steel types, 3 on the team, and I'm usually bringing 2 or 3 to every match. I just have a Politoed, which helps deal with a lot of those weaknesses. It takes out your big fire weakness.
Yeah, and then helps versus ground types.
Yeah, so I think there are lots of ways to go about that. The type synergy thing, I'm less. I guess I shouldn't just have this over here this whole time, but that's okay.
I almost feel like we should just have a checklist, like literal like boxes that you check. You print out the sheet. Did I get fake out in my draft? Did I
Yeah,
get a means to either handle or change weather slash terrain? What is my speed control? Do I have more than one type of speed control? I probably need more than one type of speed control.
yeah, and that is the quick list that I made is basically like that. And like we talked about, I don't think you need to have everything, and it's going to be impossible to have everything because you're likely not going to be able to get a tailwinder if everybody's grabbing tailwinders just because of how few there are. You're definitely not going to be able to get a redirect Pokemon
Yeah,
if everybody goes for it because there are like 10, I think, total. Maybe a little bit more, but it's a low number. It's under 20 for sure. But I think you can look at why those things are important, and then you can start picking up other, like fake out is kind of in the same vein as redirect in that it's denying your opponent a chance to kill what they want to kill, right? And so fake out is always great. Um,
fake out is so good too in the mid game, just because sometimes you just need that extra turn for Trick Room to run out, or for weather to stop, or for a light screen to peter out, or Tailwind to peter out. But you know, I think it's great to lead with fake out because you can reposition if your lead was not ideal. I think that's invaluable, but I love bringing them in the back because if you miscalculate, if someone gets the Trick Room off, it can make the difference between do I get speed back in my favor or not. Um, I also think that maybe people's priorities for team selection get narrower with each pick that they make, not only because they checked off something from the list, but once you have a specific type of sweeper, you know what you need to facilitate it. And suddenly a whole lot of things no longer become desirable because you already have that role filled. You don't want to double up or quad up on weaknesses or whatever it is. Or you need redirection or fake out so that you can swords dance.
exactly. Yeah, you might end up prioritizing the things on the checklist that work well together and not worry about, you know what, you don't have a weather changer, but you know what, maybe you're okay with taking the loss to the handful of weather teams, or you're going to have a trick roomer which is going to help you against most of them and their speed strats, or you just have a Pokemon that, like, you have a strong storm drainer. You know, and there's so many ways to deal with a lot of these strats that I feel like there are only a few things that you absolutely like. Yeah, I guess more what I'm saying is you should have some of these tools, right? Because they're all useful, and they all help you in doubles. But you don't need to have one of everything because your Intimidate might save you against that Sand Rush Dracovish just as much as a Storm Drain Gastrodon would, just as much as a Drought Torkoal would.
Yeah, and weather is scary. I'm scared of weather, but in a Dynamax world, resetting it is easier than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So don't go into it thinking that you need weather because that's another category where there are only a limited number of setters, and they definitely kind of narrow the direction that you're going unless you're Carter and you're just throwing a Hippopotas on at the end. And
Yeah. Yeah, which we know worked out very well.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Maybe another way to think about it too is you don't need all these roles because some of them overlap in functionality. Like you need to be able to stop Trick Room, but you can do that through Taunt. You can do that through Dragon Tail, Whirlwind, Roar. You can do that through just setting up Trick Room yourself.
Yeah, or have it
or you can
imprisoned.
imprison it. There's like a ton of ways to stop Trick Room. So as long as you have one of those covered, you're good. And a lot of Pokemon learn Taunt.
Yeah, and it could also just be like, if you draft an Escavalier who is going to be slower than any Trick Room threat, maybe you
That's
just
right.
bring that.
Yeah. Throw an Iron Ball on a slow
Yeah, throw an
Pokemon
Iron
and then
Ball, slot an item. But I guess really what I wanted in this intro segment to talk about to everybody is what is good in doubles. And I think that we have figured that out a lot last season. A lot of people went into doubles and didn't realize maybe what was so good in VGC compared to singles, because things are very different. Leftovers is much worse. Choice banned, and choice items in general I feel are a bit worse just because of the safety of switching is not there in VGC as it is in singles. And so along with everything we kind of talked about being good, there are a few other things that I think we could talk about here, but clear body is something that's to look for. It's really
great.
good. No matter
It
what kind of Pokemon, it doesn't have to be Metagross.
No, because we think of it as being a counter to Intimidate primarily, but I think again in a format with max moves, it's great that you're not getting any of your defenses dropped, your speed dropped. You can go in knowing that that Pokemon is going to perform exactly as you intended it, and you don't really have to adapt in game so much.
Yeah, and I feel like this season of like VGC ladder play, we're really seeing clear body and other abilities that I guess we can blanket mention, but inner focus is another.
Oblivious.
Oblivious is another one. Anything that lets you resist, intimidate, and that is honestly because Incineroar is so prevalent. That I think that a lot of these abilities, like that's why Entei might be so good right now.
Yeah, I think VGC teams always had one Intimidate user on them.
Right.
But this season, every team has Landorus and Incineroar on
Yeah.
them. And they're playing the parting shot game on top of that. And I think that it rose to prominence just because that's really hard to stop otherwise, that like
Yeah.
wall of debuffing. And I'm pretty sure Pokemon as a company expanded those other abilities to counter intimidate, like own tempo and oblivious and all those, right? Because that's not what they've done historically. It's kind of a recent
Yeah,
shift.
it's actually just in Sword and Shield, which is really cool. And when we started figuring that out, it was great. It kind of made hyper cutter Pokemon feel bad because they get
Sorry.
the short end of the stick, but it does show us that the company is trying to balance doubles, which I think they they've proved time and time again that that's their focus in terms of the competitive balance, which is great because that's what we're drafting this season. Also, another thing to go with the stat: defiant and competitive Pokemon are always things that you should be looking out for because in draft format, they're few and far between, and every time they're taking a stat lowering Dynamax move, or they're even on the field when it happens, they get their offense sharply raised.
It's fantastic. I would be looking at those Pokemon if you don't know where to start or if you happen to like one of them,
Yeah,
then take it because especially I think competitive is underrated because Defiant usually you have to take a drop and accept a drop to net one positive. But aside from Snarl, there's no automatic ability that's going to drop your special attack.
yeah.
Um, and so I think that like Melodic, even Wigglytuff
Milotic
is pretty
is
interesting.
so good. I'm really glad Milotic didn't drop to tier 2 because I think it would just be like hands down the best
It would.
option in that tier. And I still think, it's not exactly a powerhouse in tier 1, but you should not underestimate the power of that. And now I think of Articuno Galar, which I propose to drop to tier 2, and I think that because of its typing, it might still deserve the tier 2 more than Milotic. But it's another Pokemon that is high power level in that tier because of just what it can do.
Yeah. Did it end up in tier two?
Yeah.
I would have been okay with either. I would have, if you argued Airstream alone makes it tier one, that would be fine. But I think that I like seeing it in tier two because I'm hoping it'll get picked up where I didn't think it would as a
Yeah, I
as
think
a
it'd be
primary.
pretty low priority in tier 1.
It makes me think of flying types always make me think of the basic doubles combo, like Earthquake next to someone that sets up Tailwind for it or attacks the things that Earthquake can't hit. Or, it gets even more nuanced with like a flying type that also is immune to electric. Or something like you get a Landorus next to something that's discharging,
Yeah.
next to a Zapdos, for example, and they're just throwing Hail Marys at the opposing side of the field and not hurting each other. And that's kind of an old school, crude, brutal, but effective strategy. So I
Yeah.
also want to put a plug in for Disquake and swarm strategies like that.
Yeah, and I think that you can look at Storm Drain with Surf. I've seen Credilli pop up on a surprising amount of ladder matches that I play. And I've seen things like a Sharpedo with it, like surfing, and then Destiny bonding with a Sash because I got the speed boost. Really weird stuff, but I think you can have a lot of fun with Discharge Lightning Rod. Of course, like Discharge Earthquake, Boom Burst with Soundproof. Any sort of basic combo that you might have played when you were back playing Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, and I know that a lot of
Yeah.
people in the draft played that and played through a lot of doubles. So think back to what you saw back then with your Metagross earthquaking while you had a Salamence on the field. And those are totally viable things too.
Lava Plume, Flash Fire,
Yeah, Lava Plume, Flash
which we've
Fire.
really seen in the modern age with Mind Blown next to a Colossal or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, look at
Yeah.
Colossal getting activated by Dragapult so often. Like I fought that in tournament in the Smogon tournament, and yeah, used it with Weavile, of course, last season. So there's a lot of things to look for, but these things that we mentioned, like terrain, weather, fake out, ally switch, redirection, intimidate yourself, priority moves, prankster, competitive defiant. I'll put a list up, but these are things that you guys and unburden. I didn't really touch on that, but something that we've seen a lot in draft season is just how powerful unburden can be with the terrain setters that are out there, and with weakness policy if you can set that up somehow. We saw Ryan's Driftblim use it. We saw my Thievul use it. We saw Ben's Halucha use it not only with Electric Seed, but with Ice Sharding Lapras weakness policy. Sceptile got a surprise, win for Isaac against Casey with Unburden. So it kind of makes these Pokemon that you're looking at in the tiers a little more desirable if you know that they have that option to double their speed suddenly or become a big power player, especially if you're finding them in tier 3 or tier 4, where you might not expect to find that much value. Slurpuff.
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 String Shot Slurpuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
It gets fake tears. It's scary.
the I think I'm retiring from talking about Thievul, but the unburdened support mon, like the unburdened Pokemon that you don't necessarily want to max, I think is a great filler for your draft and will surprise you with how much use you can get out of them.
I think so too. Kind of one that sort of disappeared from play, but I think it's still usable is Excelgor. Um,
Oh,
Acid Spray and Struggle Bug are both fantastic moves, I think.
that's true.
And then,
He's so
I don't
fast.
personally like Final Gambit a whole lot, but I think he can taunt and he can water Shuriken. I think he's the only current user of that move, and you can use that with fun strats with some partners.
Yeah, with Palossand.
With Palossand, but you know, I don't know this, but what about with Storm Drainer? Do they get multiple
I'm not sure. That's
stat
something we'd
boosts?
have to check. I feel like the whole move would just be absorbed in that
Okay.
case.
So then, yeah, water compaction is the only one, and like weak armor, I suppose you
Yeah,
get
weak
multiple
armor.
boosts.
Totally. Weak armor is something to think about. And in that vein, something that I didn't have on my list but will tack on here is beat up and justified. More
Oh
so,
man,
look at justified Pokemon because some of them, like Arcanine, are just incredibly versatile. You could have it with Intimidate too. And then others are Pokemon that you might not realize have it, like Absol, which can become just absolutely scary beaters. And then, of course, we have the Virizion, Terrakion, Cobalion, which are all very good Pokemon. Virizion being a great Tier 2 pickup if you decide to pick up any Pokemon with beat up. So I'd look at the list of who gets beat up as well.
yeah, Virizion is a great tier two. I believe that Virizion is very good in the real VGC format right now because of Finny. Probably not as good at draft, but if you want a grass type that can go unhinged all of a sudden, it's great, and it gets Airstream.
Yeah, that's right. It does. It gets bounced like Cobalion.
But boy, don't get hit by an Airstream when you're a Virizion.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
Thinking about your comment about choice Pokemon kind of thriving in singles, and you can have a whole team of choice Pokemon and win very often in singles with their like a balance of U-turners and power. Um, and that I don't think works so well in doubles also because of protect.
Yeah,
And like eventually we'll have to talk about protect, I think, but those protect turns and learning to read them are your opportunity to like seize momentum. And that's why I think moves like light screen, reflect, setup moves like swords dance, etc., and even substitute like we used to see back in 2010, 2011, to
true.
take advantage of those predicted or broadcast protects that are definitely going to happen. Like, why attack into that when you can do something to just take control back?
Yeah, yeah. I am thinking now back to Ray Rizzo's sub Hydreigon.
Yeah, sub Hydreigon sub was really big then, and the
Yeah,
genies were running sub, of course, because prankster sub is good.
yeah. But maybe
But
something that we, I don't know why we haven't seen a resurgence of, but maybe we should.
maybe we should.
Maybe Protect is less common now because of the max move thing, and Urshifu, obviously, like
Urshifu.
not caring about Protect at all, but that is something to think about.
I think that overall, as a crew of players, we could probably all benefit from the screens. I feel that unless you have Grimmsnarl on your team or something that screams, I'm a screen user,
Yeah.
we forget to look at that TM list. But most things learn one or the other, especially the elemental Pokemon. And I don't know. I feel like if you can just sneak one of those in, it changes the complexion of a whole match.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think that there are great bulky users that would also, be good at other things like Porygon and whatnot that I've seen using that. I feel like I'm wondering why that is, and I do feel that our players on the whole are quite offensive, and that might be because of the Dynamax thing in VGC and how we're doing. But a lot of what you talked about with like the late game fake out, I was thinking that's so good because we see a lot of people blowing their Dynamax early, first turn, because that is good. You
It is good.
can just, if you kill their Dynamax first turn with your Dynamax first turn, it's likely that you're going to win from there, depending on the situation. But against a player that does a good job of switching, protecting, ally switching, what have you, if you have used your Dynamax and then in the back they have a fake out user and a Dynamax user, the tempo swing is going to be amazing. Let alone,
Yeah.
a fake out and a Trick Room into a Dynamax user, like we've seen from Tyler last season. But yeah, I think that I have a tough time thinking of screens as being good enough in doubles, but we see how good Clefairy is. And Clefairy's Friend Guard, I think, gives a pretty similar bonus to damage resistance as a screen, right?
I think I could be wrong because I only use Clefairy occasionally, but I think it's a 30% reduction instead of a 50.
Okay. But screens in doubles also do less.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, screens only protect like
Oh,
33%
then maybe it is the same.
of damage in doubles. But they protect both of your Pokemon, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that like everybody should go and try it because it's definitely a play style thing, but I have seen a lot of players succeed by trying to mitigate Dynamax damage, like you're saying early on, and then positioning themselves, chipping away at the other threats, and then just totally seizing control in the mid game. Um, so maybe it's something that I'm trying to challenge myself to use because I tend to go in with an offensive mindset, but players like the Lordran Firekeepers taught me a lot this past season. And Matt, did he have screens? Was that the Grimmsnarl?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he had
So
Porygon.
I feel like if more players, especially ones who kind of like the slower, thoughtful game, were to use screens, um, I think it would really pay off. We tend to think that Aurora Veil is the only option because we're greedy, but
Yeah.
picking one or the other is fine, especially if your team leans on the specially defensive side or the physically defensive side as it stands. You might just need one to patch that up.
Yeah, completely agree. That's definitely another move that we got to talk about. And I think we didn't talk enough about this, but Ally Switch is another move that is really good, and people should look at the users just because
Ally,
it's amazing, especially if a bulky user or a user with like a immunity or a resistance.
I love Ally Switch. It is my favorite move currently, but you go on Showdown and you play on VGC ladder with Ally Switch and people will treat you like you have the plague. Like it's a move like Minimize,
Yeah,
or something where the stigma behind it, at least in that community, is really funny, and that alone gets me to keep using it. But I think that it's very good, especially if your team is full of complementary types or immunities. That's even greater. I
yeah,
I sort of like Ally Switch just to like mitigate damage and move a protecting Pokemon over or something like that. Like it's
sure.
almost like
Great
a chess move.
turn waster.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a repositioning tool. I like that, and I do think that I see why it would have stigma. I could see Smogon doubles OU Council maybe moving to ban it eventually, just because it is this coin flip. Like, do I predict if he's gonna do it or not? But I feel like we already have Protect, which is very similar to that,
Yeah.
where you are losing out if you attack into that Protect, and I do not think that that is a toxic mechanic at all. Just like I don't think that Ally Switch, like your partner protecting for you, especially since I have used Ally Switch and just gotten bodied because of it.
Yeah, I think that there's a risk associated with it just as much as a payoff, and I think that it's because it's new and it adds that unpredictability that people don't like it. But look at the weird Pokemon that get it too. It's like definitely a ghost psychic-y move, but Rapidash, Kingler, there's
Doug
some.
Trio.
Yeah, Dugtrio is fantastic because you can switch an electric weak Pokemon you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I
out
think
of something
Cinderace
great.
gets it, Magnezone gets it. So another one that you guys should definitely check at the learn list, and if you see a Pokemon that you really like, Like, maybe you can do a little bit more research into that and decide that it might be for you. Okay, well then let's get to the next segment and let's talk about some Pokemon that we think are really good in Tier 1, maybe even in Tier 2, that would warrant a first round pick. I think we saw a lot of great first round picks last draft. We talked about me picking up Rillaboom, which I think has that terrain and fake out, checks two of those boxes that we were talking about.
And strong priority.
Yeah, and priority. So yeah, there's another very strong priority. I think we can look at other picks like Carter's Whimsicott as being an entire toolbox of itself. It has the speed priority, or the speed control. It has Prankster, which is definitely one of those things you should be looking out for. It has amazing support in all sorts of ways. It has Beat Up to activate Justified users. That's a Pokemon that, in my mind, warrants a first pick just because of how many different roles it can play.
Absolutely. I think it was voted best support Pokemon last season, and it totally deserved that. Carter knew what he was doing when he picked it first. I think he voiced some displeasure that he was going with something not so creative, but he said there's nothing better in the game than a priority Tailwind, and he carried that belief all the way to the championship.
Yeah, and it certainly worked out.
Yeah,
Another one that I think is really good is Casey's Dragapult pick,
for sure.
which has clear body, right? Stats can't be lowered. Has an amazing speed tier, one of the best, and not only has incredible offensive potential on both the physical and the special side, with access to physical Airstream and Steel Spike and special, fire, electric, water moves, but it also gets Ally Switch, Will-O-Wisp, Beat Up,
Screens,
Helping
yeah.
Hand.
Thunderwave, Wisp.
Yeah. Being a ghost type, which I maybe didn't mention earlier, but ghost types are good in themselves just because they are immune to fake out, which is a very big aspect of doubles, as we talked about.
Yeah, I can't think of a Pokemon that more completely can pivot between a support role and an offensive role than Dragapult. I can't. Unless you count something like Venusaur that just banks on putting something to sleep. But if we're talking about like a diverse support move pool that's very difficult to predict, game one at least, Dragapult fits the bill, and I think it's safely like one of the top 3 picks.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what I'll do, I guess, to start is just throw you some of what I think are the top picks of Tier 1, with Dragapult being number 1 on my list, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
And we can talk about why that may or might not be a very good pick for your Tier 1. If you have any ideas also, I'll let you throw in some Pokemon.
What I would say for VGC Series 9 is a little different than what I'd say for Draft. I'm going to stick to Draft, but I believe that Rillaboom fits the bill for both of those formats, just because it checks those 3 boxes, and it's strong. It's strong, and you can build several strategies around it. That said, it's easy to thwart on the defensive side, just because its move pool is a little bit limited. As a supporter, it's not that great outside of Fake Out and Knockoff. But I think if you pair it with the right stuff, it facilitates a whole lot, and it's just kind of scary. That priority just reminds me of like the days of Choice Band Caesar Bullet Punch, and it's hard to face. You can have everything going your way. You can have set up Trick Room, you can have paralyzed it, and it can still just beat you.
Yeah, it's incredible how much power that Grassy Glide has. When you think, I would need to throw up this calculation, but I have checked it and it's not entirely inaccurate. But Grookey who has, I think, maybe 90 base attack or something. His Grassy Glide in terrain is as strong as Technician Caesar Bullet Punch.
Wow.
So you
Okay.
just have to see that Rillaboom is throwing out something that, in my mind, is not necessarily a worse type than Steel, maybe better in the world of bulky waters. And he has other great options as well. And
He has other options. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think another terrain setter. In fact, my next two picks are also terrain setters, but Tapu Fini is my number two pick because first off, Water Fairy is an amazing type. Um, Tapu Fini is great bulk. He has relatively strong offense. He has Misty Terrain, which, while it does not give you any sort of terrain boost in terms of damage as the other three do, it does completely remove your fear of any status ailments. And it gives you grounded dragon resistance, which can totally be viable and is something that people kind of forget about. I forget about it until I'm using my Latios Tapu Fini team and I'm throwing off a Draco Meteor and I've neutered my own attack because of it. It also has Calm Mind. It has Haze, which I think we'll talk about later, but is a great move for this format, and it is bulky enough to pull it off. It has Taunt. It has Soak, which you could pair with a strong electric type or perform any sort of Shedinja shenanigans if you decide to go that route. In general, it's just a very strong Pokemon in itself that I could see you almost always bringing on your teams, and the fact that it is a terrain setter for your unburdened Pokemon, I think, just adds to that.
It's very durable too. I would count it as one of the most reliable Pokemon. Like even though something like Dragapult that we just championed is more versatile, I see Dragapult get one shot sometimes before it can do something because the opponent thought of something zany. But Tapu Fini without like helping hand, crazy amount of super effective damage is very, very hard to kill. It doesn't have to max, but it can max, and it can be pretty scary. And a bulky water type has kind of always just been something that is good on a team. I'm not going to say you need a bulky water, but the term bulky water has been ringing in all of our ears for decades for a reason. It's like a good thing to have.
Yeah, and we could get into the semantics of why that's good, but two weaknesses only, and great resistances, and an offensive type that is not resisted by too much.
Too much, yeah.
And usually access to, ice moves, and Tapu Fini does get Icy Wind, does get Ice Beam. But yeah, so I think that that's incredibly solid. I might have stars in my eyes just because Tapu Fini is being used a lot right now in normal VGC. In fact, I just saw that there is a Tapu Fini. Here's another good thing for Misty Terrain. Misty Terrain Self-Swagger. Swagger is a move that sharply raises the target's attack, but then makes them confused. We've seen it in the past a little bit. Swagger actually has far fewer users now that is no longer a TM. Or I think maybe is a TM, but they just cut the learn list quite low. But there have been people using physical Tapu Fini and swaggering it. There have been people that have been using own tempo Avalugg, like you could have a confusion resist Pokemon, or you have Tapu Fini leading with your swagger user and you just switch Tapu Fini out into something that gets your +2 from whoever you're pairing it with. So just another little versatility piece for Tapu Fini and why Misty Terrain is just so good.
It's so good for many reasons. If you're a physical sweeping team, one of the only ways to stop you is burning you. And if you could just stop that without having to set up safeguard or worry about predicting who's going to burn you, that's great. I also feel like Thunderwave, though more a thing of the past, was like the strategy for just dismantling hyper offense and balance teams. And you don't deal with that. And then my least favorite Pokemon to face in Venusaur, even though it's one of my fave, is no longer a problem, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's just invaluable that you're getting that as maybe the bonus if you just need a bulky water, or maybe that's the entire crux of your team.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like compared to other terrain setters that do have like better users, I do think that Galar Wheezing as the other Misty terrain setter is fairly underwhelming. I think it would be good. He has that option, and that's probably why he's also placed in a tier above the other Wheezing. But you probably want to be using neutralizing gas with him.
Yeah,
So
he's
it is
kind
a
of a
rare
cool
commodity.
pick because he could go either way, but I think you're right that yeah, I don't know, just pick Finny if it's available.
Yeah, if
You know, Finny of the top 5 usage Pokemon currently in Series 9 makes one of the best sense for draft because things like Incineroar, I think, become a little for some reason I feel like Incineroar and Landorus are less good in draft. I can't say why, but um maybe we're better at working around Intimidate when we know that it's coming. Maybe that's all it is.
Yeah, and I think that those Pokemon, there's a lot to be said that maybe Incineroar is better because Dragapult and Metagross are very common. Landorus might be better because of Regieleki, and
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are just as good in draft, you know? I think that Ben showed us late in the season what a setup Landorus can do. It's like
yeah,
if you could just fake out and have your Landorus swords dance, I mean, things are going to get messy fast.
yeah, very,
Um,
very true.
and if you're going to play defensively, I still think there's probably no better Pokemon than Incineroar with Snarl, Parting Shot, Fake Out. Then,
Yeah,
there's other intimidators, but none are going to slow things down like that.
Tony the Tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then filling out my talk on the terrain setters, I think that along with Rillaboom with Tabu Fini, Indeedee female is a pick that maybe wouldn't seem to be so good because I think Casey ended up picking up pretty late. But do remember that we had a lot of tier 1 picks last season, and this season you're going to at most be able to get 2 of them. And Indeedee female is a Pokemon that can really just start your draft off very strong. It has Follow Me, which, hot commodity, very good. And it also is one of the few Follow Me Pokemon that cannot be stopped by Fake Out because it creates Psychic Terrain, a terrain that not only boosts Psychic Power by 1.5, but it stops all priority moves from hitting grounded targets. And Psychic Terrain is something that we see all the time in draft and otherwise. People forget about it and then they realize how good it is. I've done it, you've done it,
I've done it.
but oops, Psychic Terrain, my prankster
My
taunt
prankster has done
didn't
it.
work. Exactly. Stopping priority is amazing, and it can be annoying for your side of the field too if you do not build your team accordingly and think about it. But I think that Indeedee F is maybe something not on people's radars that should be just because it has incredible offensive and defensive capabilities. That move
Totally.
Expanding Force is nuts.
It's nuts. It's nuts. It's crazy spread damage. Talk about a swarm strategy. You could just put that thing next to, I don't know, another psychic type and
Yeah, a
just
psychic
go
type
at it.
or a fairy type that's going to be dealing with the
The darks.
the dark Pokemon that
Yeah.
you're dealing with. What's to say that you're not running Hatterene, who is a psychic type and a fairy type that could be doing both things for you, and is
Yeah.
running a trick room mode.
Indeedee is fantastic. It can run its own seed. It can facilitate seed users on its team. Stopping priority in itself is super valuable. It's got good special attack.
Yeah, it gets
Um,
Trick and can kind of act as like a pseudo knockoff if it's running Psychic Seed and then just takes whatever item.
I think it totally merits a first pick because then you kind of have your run of all the sweepers in the lower tiers to complement it. I would actually argue that the higher tier support Pokemon might be more valuable than the higher tier sweepers because it's harder to find a good support Pokemon in the low tiers.
I so agree, and that's something that I think I realized very late into the nomination process for these drafts. But Tier 4 is very devoid of good support Pokemon, and there's a reason because they're very good. But when we were talking about should Xatu drop down to Tier 4, or is he going to be like too good of a support Pokemon? Same with Shuckle. I was getting to think that there are some very scary sweepers in Tier 4. Barbaracle, Crustle, Armaldo, all these rock types, I guess. But there are not so many very good support. I completely agree that a good support, they can also be offensive at points. You're looking at Whimsicott. You're looking at Indeedee F. You're looking at also my next nomination, Togekiss,
Oh, yeah.
as again redirect can have strong offensive potential because of it living a lot. You can sludge wave it for weakness policy. It can use super luck to just throw out max crit moves, which should not be taken as a joke.
No, the max crit moves can just end a Pokemon's life, and then its crit spread moves are just frustrating. Like
Right.
if it's throwing out dazzling gleams and heat waves that are critting every turn on one Pokemon or the other, that's too much from a non-Dynamax Pokemon, especially one that's beefy and intended to just be absorbing
Yeah.
and redirecting hits. I mean, Togekiss has been around in VGC ever since it came out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, and
And
it's here to
since
stay.
getting the fairy typing, it has become
Yeah,
much better because it first off gains a second immunity. So ground and dragon, if you're going up against a Togekiss, beware, because it's going to be soaking up all of that. And the thing, yeah, it's great, and I could see it being a strong first pick just because it's that support mon that has a little bit of offense that you can really just. It's going to be good with everything.
yeah. I like that you mentioned it right after Indeedee because there's a lot of similarities. Like they both have the offensive potential. Togekiss because of super luck and I think 120 special attack, and Indeedee because of the boosted psychic terrain and its move becoming scary in psychic terrain.
Yeah.
And they both have. Do they both have speed control, or is only the male Indeedee
Yeah.
capable of learning Trick Room?
So that's
Okay.
something that you do have to know is that female Indeedee does not get Trick Room. So if you're like me and you just assumed that it got Trick Room, like when I fought Casey, I was so
Yeah.
worried about that, but it does not in fact get it, which I think was a good play by the developers again.
I think so. Just to differentiate them, even give them each some
Yeah,
flavor, like the Meowsticks. But
exactly.
Togekiss is a redirector that can also redistribute speed
Yeah.
with Max Airstream. I don't know
Yeah.
if it can Icy Wind too, but it's got a lot going for it, and it's very bulky. In DD you can usually one shot unless it has the Seed Boost or an Assault Vest or something weird, but Togekiss really is another Pokemon that sticks around. Like Celesteela, I would mention is a real good first pick.
Yeah.
Moltres Galar sticks around, another really good first pick.
Yeah, both on my list. I'm glad you mentioned them, but having the max airstream and the potential to just be really threatening, bulky setup options. Celesteela being able to go both physical and special, and
Yeah,
Moltres just having that ridiculous offensive option with nasty plot and berserk and weakness policy. Like the thing can get out of hand.
out of hand. And really, I think that dark typing is kind of easy to exploit right now. Um, Fairy feels strong.
Yeah,
Fairy feels real strong. And I think being weak to electric is tough. But if you can pair Moltres Galar with something, often a Raichu I see, but I picked Togedemaru because it was the only thing left. I should have gone Marowak, actually. I love
Yeah.
the Marowak that you picked because there I could have gone with like the earthquake next to something that doesn't care type
Yeah.
thing. So
Totally right. Yeah. And I have a few more picks, but my list is pretty much getting to the end here. Um, this is. I hate to say it because I'm worried that when I talk about it, it's going to be gone. And this is a Pokemon that I thought for sure would be my first pick if I was going first. But it is Thundurus Incarnate, being a Pokemon that can do so many things, which I know I talked about. I love that. And I think as a first pick, you either have to pick something that is going to have multiple roles on your team, or you need to have something that is so good at what it does that you are just always going to bring it in that role. Thundurus is a Pokemon that I think fits so many roles because he has Prankster with Thunder Wave, Eerie Impulse, Substitute, right? He can do all manner of things. Swagger. He also has the strong special, just discharge option if need be. He's a great Sludge Wave activator. I've seen him paired with Togekiss as a great way to activate that weakness policy. He also gets a Brutal Swing to activate weakness policies that, in that manner, he'd be great with Metagross. I was pairing him with Articuno Galar to activate to activate weakness policy. He also has Defiant, one of those abilities we were talking about that's so good, and that's the only way that you're going to get an Airstream out of him is through using Fly with a physical Thundurus, which is pretty scary. Like, he's going to make sure that your opponent is not bringing their Intimidate user, which can kind of form your lead building skills quite effectively, even if you just have that threat, whether you're using Prankster or Defiant.
yeah, I agree that he's fantastic. I have mixed feelings about him because he always seems so good on paper and then mine die. Um, but man, I really liked using him bulky back in the day. I would like to talk to Riley, I guess, about whether he feels like Defiant Thundurus pulled its weight or not as that pick. Because I feel like it deters your opponent, but is that really the Pokemon that you want to max? Or is that just better off supporting your team? And I
Yeah.
wonder, even though I think that maybe objectively speaking, Thundurus is better, I wonder if we should also, in the same statement, plug Tornadus just for having Tailwind. Like,
Yeah.
Taunt and Tailwind aren't as diverse as the suite of like Eerie Impulse and Thunder Wave and all the stuff that Thundurus gets, but I think that Tornadus just is more cut and dry. And if you can't get Whimsicott, but you like the idea of just getting a Tailwind up and going to town, it's great too.
Yeah, and still has a Brutal Swing
Yeah,
as, an activation.
same family of moves, right?
Yeah, very similar. I'm not sure if it gets Swagger, but it might.
I think
Um,
they both still get Swagger. They both get Sludge Wave, I think.
okay. Yeah. And not to mention that it's just strong Hurricane, strong Airstream that I see myself maybe, maxing it just as much as I would my Thundurus, but having
Yeah,
the option to throw off a Hurricane as opposed to a Fly, which is great.
there's a lot of good Pokemon in Tier 1. I'm
Yeah.
looking at Porygon 2. I'm even looking at like Amoonguss. It's up top on the list, and we just didn't talk about it, but talk about a support Pokemon that you might pick first that covers a whole lot of check boxes for that team, right? Counter to Trick Room, putting things to sleep is wonderful.
Hmm.
Redirecting is wonderful. Clear Smog
Yeah, gets
is
foul
awesome.
play, which
Gets foul play.
you should be looking at foul play as a move, just because, especially on a dark type, even if because you get the stab, using your opponent's attack stat is just so good. We've seen it in body press, and we see it in foul play that if you have an offensive option in which you do not have to invest in the EVs, it makes it so much better because
Great.
you are free to be bulky. And Obviously way better on ladder, but it will kill Dragapult in one hit, in so many cases. Or at least 2-hit KO a lot of things that it's going to be super effective against. Yeah, I like you bringing up Porygon 2. I didn't really get to my suite of Trick Room Pokemon, but talking away from Thundurus Incarnate, which I might be too enamored with it doing a bunch of different things, but if we want to talk about Pokemon that are just really, really good at the one thing they do, let's talk Trick Room. Let's talk Hatterene, which, with the Gmax getting rolled up, you should be looking at every Pokemon that has a Gmax, because some of them are very good, like Hatterene having that max smite capability. So good, right, Tyler?
Lots of things about it, right? It's slow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can't be taunted,
Yeah, Magic
correct?
Bounce,
Yeah, I mean, Magic Bounce is great.
incredible ability. It has very strong offense, gets the mystical fire for steel types that might threaten it. It trick rooms very well. It is just a strong Pokemon whether you're maxing it or not, and I think that if you like the idea of Trick Room, you should be looking at it, at Porygon 2, at Dusclops for all ranges of your Trick Room setters, where Hatterene is kind of like an offensive threat, and Dusclops and Porygon are more support threats, but all of them are definitely bulky enough to pull it off for you.
Yeah, I want to throw some more honorable mentions in with Stakataka
Right.
for Trick Room, and he can also just either go bananas with Beast Boosts or Iron Defense and Body Press.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mimikyu,
Yeah.
even though its power output is lackluster, I think Mimikyu is pretty good because Disguise is going to let you pull something off. And Shadow Sneak for a weakness policy proc or something is cool. It can Swords Dance itself.
And it can't be faked out,
Can't
which
be faked out.
is amazing for a Trick Room Pokemon, because if it's a ghost, or sorry, if it's going to be have a sash or take a hit with disguise, you're going to want to find a way to stop it. And so Mimikyu, you're kind of left with Taunt as your only option, unless you really are confident in being able to double attack and break through that disguise. I think that going with the Trick Room Sweepers, if you want to take a look at the other side of things, you're maybe thinking, well, I don't know which Trick Roomer I want, but I know that I want to run Trick Room. You could look at Glastrier as an incredible Trick Room Sweeper that's just going to be fine without Trick Room setup in most cases as well.
Yeah, and there's talk about another Pokemon that does one thing very well. That's
Mm-hmm.
live and dish out incredible amounts of damage. And if you can keep it alive throughout the match, you might just have this thing on your hands that can't be killed.
Yeah. This thing is
And it's so good.
it's ridiculous. I mean, we
It's
were
so
looking
good.
at ways to kill it,
You
Assault Vest Glastrier, in one hit. And we were like, okay, so we're talking Magic Room to get rid of the Assault Vest, paired with a Magnezone Steel Beam.
choice specs.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
with
it's really
Battery,
good.
or Steely Spirit, rather.
Well, and listen, I like what you're saying because Trick Room can be found in weird places throughout the tiers,
Mm.
and there are some good ones even in the really low tiers, I would argue. Um, so if that's a style of play you're interested in, or if you just want a slow Pokemon to counter Trick Room, or if you just don't care, like a lot of weakness policy Pokemon just want to take the hit first so that they can then counter punch and suddenly a hole got blown in the team.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of Glastrier leads with just redirection, an Indeedee or something like that just pulls damage away, and then it goes to town. It starts getting defensive boosts, and then, oh my God, when am I going to be able to take this thing down?
Yeah. Completely agree.
It's not slow. It's the opposite of slow, but I want to bring up that I think Regieleki is still probably a decent pick, even though it only does one thing, which is be fast and try and either kill something or slow things down. It's just, it's hard to deal with ground types with Regieleki unless you're willing to Dynamax it and go for like the max strike through Hyper Beam, which is cheeky and effective. But there's another Pokemon that I don't know that I want to be using my max on consistently.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go the Regieleki route, which I fully support, I do think it's a horrifying Pokemon, but I think you need to really work against what is going to be absorbing those hits, whether that's through
Yeah.
an ability suppressor like Wheezing, whether that's through soaking with a Pokemon that can use soak and turn a Pokemon into a water type for you. So you need to run like a Scarf soak user or protect your Regieleki, or something I've seen that is pretty wild but has gotten me good is Ring Target being
Hmm.
tricked onto the opponent by a prankster, whether it's Grim Snarl, any sort of prankster trick user. But Ring Target is an item that you might not be familiar with, but it removes the immunity from whoever's holding it. So I've had my Landorus maxed, facing off against Regieleki. Sure, nothing bad's gonna happen to me. Suddenly, whoop! Ring Target gets switched
Oh, that's
on, and
awesome.
Regieleki just kills me in one hit. And that is something that if you pick up Regieleki, you might think, well, maybe I can go for Morgrim, maybe I can, pick up whatever trick user that's going to be fast enough, or ideally has Prankster.
Yeah, that's great thinking. Yeah, the moment you make your first pick, don't let it narrow your vision too much, but start thinking about who starts fitting next to that in the jigsaw puzzle, who is a good partner, who is supportive to what you just picked. And man, I keep seeing more that we should mention. Like both Urshifus are good picks.
Yeah, they break through
Uh,
Protect.
yeah, Cinderace is a wildly good offensive pick, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Less risky than something like Durant, which is also a scary pick. I think that
I think we have to talk about Metagross,
Met,
Salamence, and Gyarados just as amazing ability offensive sweepers that can be activated via weakness policy and are
yeah,
fast enough to do scary things.
for sure. And I don't think its ability is great, though I think Sandvale is cheeky, but Garchomp is in that category and its speed tier is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So I do.
Tracheon too, maybe.
I do have to like blanket say for all of you that are listening and maybe want some advice that there are obviously so many really good tier 1 Pokemon that you could pick up, and I think that we're maybe narrowing things down. Like, I did want to mention that along with those, I think you can go the weather route depending on where you are in the draft, but picking up Torkoal or Politoed or Tyranitar would be decent tier 1 picks, especially if you're able to do a twofer at the end. Um,
You know what
but,
we should have done instead?
what?
It's just gone through and said which tier ones are not good first
That's
picks.
what I was about to suggest we do, is just to name off some Pokemon that we think you probably shouldn't be going for your first tier 1 pickups. Maybe because they only synergize with a few things, or maybe because they're just underwhelming and you might not have to worry about picking up later. But if I
Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna get into if I'm looking at Pokemon that I wouldn't want to pick first. It's probably like Dracovish, Regidrago, Comfey, though it could be. It just feels like if you have the option to pick up Whimsicott or another really good support Pokemon, you might not want to miss out on another tier 1 by picking Comfey. Tapu Koko seems underwhelming to me, though I think that you could make a strong electric terrain team, but in my opinion, you should be prioritizing Pincurchin instead, because he dropped to tier 3. Hydreigon feels underwhelming
I think so too. I was about to say its name because just the quad weakness is really nasty, and yeah, that quad weakness is really nasty.
I think Cresselia is underwhelming.
Cresselia is underwhelming. I think Conkeldurr and Corviknight would be kind of weird first picks.
Yeah, I think Clefairy Bull is an underwhelming first pick. I think even Charizard might be an underwhelming first pick.
Though, no, I'm gonna fight for Charizard because it's got the Max Wildfire package
That's
up in
true.
there. It's 100 base speed, and it
Airstream.
doesn't need Sun to function. You know, it can cause a lot of just passive damage through that move. So, if someone picked Charizard, I would say right on, brother.
All right. I respect it. I respect it. But yeah, so many of these Pokemon I'm looking at can do crazy things and have good use, like Pheromosa, which is a Pokemon that I would love to see used well in our draft because it does seem like something scary that it is tough to use. That just crazy glass cannon that also has coaching and speed swap.
Yeah, I think it is very good, and I can't wrap my mind around what it can do. That's probably why I'm
Yeah, but
haven't talked about it. But it every time I face it, it does a different thing.
yeah, I
We
think
should have done this because there's only like 3 or 4 of these that I wouldn't
no,
pick
I
first.
think that the point of us highlighting the good things is to talk about why they're good. And if we're talking about why things are bad, well, it's like, well, it doesn't get this. It
Yeah,
doesn't like.
you're right.
It's harder to talk about why things are underwhelming. It's just the lack of attributes that these other choices might have. But that said, if you really like Buzzwole, if you really like Milotic, if you like Naganadel, I don't think that any tier 1 is explicitly a bad pick, but just think about what we've talked about and what make those Pokemon really good first tier 1 picks and why they might get snapped up early. And then when it comes back around and you have your points and you're deciding if you want to take another tier 1 or if you want to take 2 tier 2s, you can kind of think about where to best put your points to get the value that you want.
I'm excited. I feel like just the first pick is a lot to think about, and then that pick's going to get made, and then I'm going to have no idea what to pick next.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we could, we're probably going to talk about it more if we do a draft chat mid draft. But as we've talked about, as Carter has mentioned to me personally, if you are not in the top 10 of picks, or maybe the top 15, you could also consider going for a tier 2 first pick.
Right
Because
off the
there are
bat.
plenty of Pokemon that are really good, and though obviously, let's say you're picking Entei, which I think is a great tier 2. He's not going to be as good as your Charizard or your Tapu Fini, whatever, but the value you are getting out of the difference between Entei and other tier 2s that you might be picking are going to make up for what you missed out on in the value of tier 1 picks. And I mention Entei because he is immune to flinching, he's immune to intimidate, and he has a move that's very strong that burns 50% of the time, which is really good. I think that you could look at any Pokemon that has dropped from tier 1 to tier 2, like the aforementioned Xurkitree, very scary. Articuno
Very scary.
Galar, very scary. Rotom-Mow, very scary at good value for tier 2. And there are plenty of other options. I think if I look at my tier 2, I'm looking at, now that you mentioned Charizard, Blastoise for tier 2 because he gets the Gigantamax damage over time move. He gets Fake Out. He gets Shell Smash. He gets Icy Wind. He is a great. He can Scarf Water Spout if you really want him to. I think that he's a tier 2 that you could get a lot of value from could help build a team around him. You know, you could do weakness policy stuff with him. And there are a lot of Pokemon in this tier that you might consider along with him. Like Hawlucha is great if you think you can pick up a terrain. I think Ninetales Alola as a weather setter in tier 2 is nuts.
It's nuts.
Because it is very strong. It can set up Aurora Veil immediately, and you're going to be able to piece together some very strong... Like, I could see a tier 2 heavy Hail team with Arctozolt, and then you're getting Bee or Beartic or something, and you have a very strong core without even needing to spend a tier 1 slot, which you could then shore up with a very strong water type to cover your, Tapu Fini would be great with that Hail core, just type-wise. Or Primarina, I guess, if we're assuming that you're not able to get your first pick.
There's some really powerful stuff in, too.
There's some really powerful stuff.
Azumarill is no joke.
Yeah, Sableye is just
great.
an incredible prankster user.
Lapras, I believe, deserved to move up here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chandelure is great.
Mm-hmm. I think Raikou is a strong Pokemon. I think Raichu is very strong. Tier
I think
2.
Raichu is that speed alone plus, well, I'm not going to talk about Raichu because he got sniped the last time.
Mamoswine. I want to throw Mamoswine a recommendation because it can't be intimidated. It has Ice Shard if you want to activate your weakness policies somehow, or your Snowballs, which we'll talk about at a later date. But it's just a very strong Pokemon with different abilities that would be good for your team. Silvally, if we're talking about value, I haven't really tapped into what this thing can do for you, but it gets Grass Pledge, which already has a bunch of great uses, I think, and it has Parting Shot, and it can be any of 17 types to help with your team.
Yeah, that is true.
I think that, it got nominated for Tier 3, but I think that it's just so much versatility and so hard for your opponent to play around everything when your Silvally has a relatively good moveset already, and then it can pull off a very strong physical attack of any type.
Can it Snarl?
Yeah.
Wow.
It can Icy Wind as well, I believe.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it can Snarl. I might be wrong. I'll put a disclaimer. But yeah, so I think you can start thinking about Tier 2 first picks even, and even maybe look at Tier 3 if you are desperate and you want to get ahead, but that might be later on in the draft. I'm saying these things because I'm not sure when the next time we are going to have a chance to talk, how far the draft is going to be along, but please look at all the Pokemon that have dropped. Like I was just looking at some Pokemon that are really good. Orbeetle in Tier 3 with access to Frisk, which is an amazing ability we didn't talk about, and its G-Max is just a lot of value down there, as well as like Stonejourner that recently dropped, Pincurchin, Umbreon, Malamar, which are just kind of like Pokemon that are really going to be helpful for you, and I think outvalue a lot of things in that lower tier. Sceptile.
Yeah.
Drampa, Aromatisse.
Sceptile is in Tier 3?
I believe so.
Wow.
Yeah, speaking of like strong, unburden, is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay, good.
So see, there's like some really powerful cannons down here, and maybe the answer is to get your support mon in Tier 1, or at least don't despair if the Pokemon that you wanted is gone by the time you get there. Maybe you just start building your team in the lower tiers and then work your way up, and there will be Tier 1s left over till the end of the draft.
Yeah,
so
many more than last time due to the points.
So maybe it'll just be about picking the one that fits this new team that you've created the best.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, think about those moves. Think about what's getting packaged with good Gigantamax, because I haven't done that enough. I'm thinking now about Sandaconda, who is a tier 3 Pokemon that can set weather quite easily.
Trap.
And trap with its Gmax form. And yeah, I think that's a good start for our recommendations. Again, don't take these as the thing to do, but this is our way of thinking and what we look for in Pokemon, and maybe it can help you look for some things that are good too. We could talk so much longer on good Pokemon. I'm just looking at the list and I'm like, wow, Kangaskhan, wow. Like, Porygon normal is great, tier 4.
It is good.
Thievul, oh yeah.
Are you sick of Thievul, or is it going to be your first pick?
I would love to see someone else pick it up because they think
Play
it's
it,
cool.
yeah.
I think that if I got a really good terrain setter, I might consider it again. But yeah, I guess let's say a quick goodbye. Thank you guys for tuning in and for doing this with us again so shortly after the last season. I'm very excited to see how everybody's teams play out, and I'm excited to get drafting by the end of this week.
Me too. Life's going to be good again.
Life's going to be good again. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.